Okay, everybody, welcome to the second Crow's Corner. We may have a special guest tonight if they're able to make it. We may have someone from the actual XD team. So we're hoping they stop by, but um, we'll see. Today, we're going to go over the questions you guys have put in the chat and into the form. And if you guys have any other questions you want for the future, you can send out those questions through the news article in the news channel. Just click on the link that's in there and it'll link you to a Google form. And we're compiling a list of all those for future Crow's Corners. So the first thing is the FAQ that went out, and we have some people to thank for these questions. As far as the 3-to-1 beacons, that was submitted by 2G Style, and we got an answer from devs on that. As far as why they've been removed, they made changes to where they're not individually needed for individual maps, and they also increased the drop rate of a lot of the beacons. So they increased the drop rate of a lot of the beacons. And also, if anybody can real quick, just see if we can raise the limit of people in the channel, one of the moderators, please.
Yeah, let me
Um,
see how to do.
and so
You got
that's
it.
the reason
Okay.
that they made the Nether Realm not combinable as far as the beacons, because you should be pretty sustainable up to 7 if you keep a track of your beacons. TM8 beacons, they're not really designed to be just continuously run over and over and over and over again. So that's not a feature that's going to be changed. That's a design intent. So that's that. Thanks to a lot of people about the Trade House UI question. We had a lot of feedback on the Trade House UI and being able to search for Elementium. And we are, yes, going to be able to search by Elementium. We don't know when, we don't know how long it's going to take them to implement that. Not that it's going to take forever, but we just don't have a specific timeline to give everybody. But it is a priority of the devs to get that trade house updated and get the UI more user friendly as far as the search goes. So that is being worked on and being relayed to them that that's a big concern. The other one was a customizable loot filter. That's another one that was a big concern of you guys, and we passed that along. They are also working on a customizable loot filter so that you can see and have a little more control over what you see on the ground. We don't know what form it's going to come in or a timeline on that either, but we do have that coming as well. So that's coming. The patch notes that are coming, the patch notes that came out this morning are what was changed in the update this morning. As far as any more information than that, what I have is that there will be one of those with every update, and that's the information that I've gotten from the devs, that there will be one of those with every update. As far as these ghost nerfs go, I don't know exactly what's going on with those, but I will get some more feedback to the devs on that and find out if we can get some more details as to what's going on with those. As far as them stopping doing it, I know it's mid-season, guys. I know people build their builds around certain things. They affect me too. They affect all of us equally, but it is a beta that's just been out for a week. So we have to give them the chance to be able to change some things and see how it goes and not wait 3 months just to make a few changes and then see how it goes for 3 months and then make a few changes and then see how it goes for 3 months. We'd be at this forever. So it only been out for a week. We do have to give them that chance. The changes are going to keep coming. The guild features are the next thing on the board. That is the next major feature coming out. So we've gotten confirmation that that is the next major feature coming out. And so we don't know an exact timeline, but it should be soon. I can't give any more information than that. Um, it's not going to be next year. It's not going to be way down the road. I can say that. So that's guilds, and then co-op would be the next big feature after that. So those are the two
Um,
next big features coming.
Rob, we may want to real quick just make an emergency event channel because due to a Discord limitation, this channel is not going to be able to have more. Wait, no, now the limit's 43. How did that happen? Oh, okay. Never mind. Yeah, okay, then never mind. Keep going, Rob.
Okay. And so the guilds and co-op, they're definitely coming. They're the next two things. Guilds first, then co-op. And when I put on there, are you working on any particular bug? We are getting bug issues reports from you guys. We keep track of trends that we see. We meet together as mods. We actually meet together as devs. Yesterday or the day before was the first meeting where all the mods were there as well, and they can attest. It is a back and forth discussion. The developers actually ask, like, "Whoa, hold on, we didn't know about that one. Let me ask you some questions about that one. Can you make me some notes on that one? Can you make me some details on that? Exactly what's going on?" So they are definitely interested in what we have to say as a community, and we are having those meetings to get those details to them. They are working on all of the bugs that are prevalent. It's just a matter of time. The settings bug should be fixed for everybody, so yay on that. And other ones are just going to keep coming. The path of progression and achievements resetting, it's an easy answer. The path of progression is going to reset every season, and the path of achievements will not. That's per your account. So that's just a little information on that. The seasonal pets are going to be permanent. There's no doubt about it. There's no question about it. Even the seasonal mechanic pets will be permanent because the seasonal dark scourge and corrosion will be available in future seasons. It's not going to take as much of a shining forefront star of the stage role as it's taking in this season, but the mechanic is not just going away. It will remain part of the game. So we don't know exactly how, but it will definitely be a part of the game and whatnot. Also, if anybody's listening, I know Ducky's out there in general chat, but let's keep questions that we want answered inside this Crow's Corner over to the Crow's Corner chat. You can find that up at the very top right of your screen if you're on PC, where you see the names. There's a little chat bubble. And then if you're on a phone, you can swipe to the side and you'll see the chat. So let's try and keep them inside the actual channels chat, just because general is blowing up like crazy right now. And that's pretty much it for the FAQ that went out, but I do want to go over some other questions that were asked. And what is Flurry of Slash for? All the skills can be used. You've just got to read carefully. We are going to go over a couple of skills on Friday's meeting. We're going to go over some skill tags, which was supposed to be today's, but unfortunately, Kirar had an emergency. So we're going to go over some skills, and that'll help out with some of the odd skills, hopefully, because you can see exactly what all the tags are going to mean. That's just a physical one that allows you to dash, and if you have agility blessings, you get to eat them up for no cooldown and dash again with slashes at the end of the dash. As far as damage conversion increases, I really don't see those coming. That comes from Stylix. I just don't see it happening over 100% because then you would over convert your damage and it would basically be a 50% damage increase, which would be a huge increase. So that's there. Also, more questions from Stylix. When activating the Dark Surge, what causes the boss to spawn? It's just random. It's just random. You want to wait until after you've killed your boss or you're at the boss to spawn your first Dark Surges, and you want to make sure that you save a Dark Surge for after the boss is dead, because the only way you can spawn that random boss that I am aware of is basically to have the boss dead and spawn your Dark Surge. So just keep in mind that that's how you're going to get those bosses that drop those extra special items. And then we also have another good one from Stylix, or Silex. I'm sorry, I keep calling you Stylix. I'm sorry about that. From Silex, and that's the difference between additional, extra, and plain damage. Can you take that extra?
Yeah, okay. So
Extra is going to take
extra more,
damage.
additional, all that stuff, that is exactly the same multiplier. It's the exact same thing. It's just a translation problem. Increased is not the same thing. So how it's calculated is that you got your base damage, and your base damage for attacks is your weapon damage, and your base damage for spells is the listed spell damage. And increased percent will multiply that value, and added damage will add to the base value, and it's considered the base. So you take the value you get with the base damage and the increased damage, and then extra slash additional slash more will multiply that. So it's a multiplier of multipliers.
So it multiplies, just from my understanding as a little old plebe. What you're saying is that the increased and just plain old damage is applying before all the math, or during all the math, and then that extra, additional, and more is happening at the very end when it's actually the damage is all calculated, it's all said and done. If it's 1 million damage and you have 30% more, it's going to be 1.3 million.
You're probably right about that, although I think there's a couple niche cases where that's not the case, but that's not important.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I've got that because I have trouble understanding that too. So that's definitely a good question. But yeah, extra, additional, and more are the same things. They're at the near at the end of the calculations.
Uh,
Um,
Actually, this is where a misunderstanding comes in. Um, when a thing says you have 40% more spell damage, it is multiplying your spell damage. So if you have 100% spell damage, 40% more spell damage is 140% spell damage. It just multiplies the value that it's asking, or it's multiplying the value of what you already have. So if you have only 10%, it would only be a 4% increase.
right. Yeah. If you've got multiple damage types, of course, you're going to have to do some complicated math on this. But this is just assuming one main damage type.
Yeah.
That it's happening. Assuming everything I said, assume one main damage type for that.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
if the spell is
and
tagged as spell, 40% more spell damage is going to function as 40% more, and I did testing on that.
right.
Okay.
Exactly. So, and then as far as controller support, we don't know when it's coming, but I play on mobile all the time. I don't use a controller, um, but that's me. I know a lot of people really want it, and it is something that's coming, but I will say that it's not like a burning right up front issue. I do know that. So I am sorry to give that news, but I'd rather shoot it to you guys straight. It is definitely planned though. And as far as a roadmap for quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3 from Shatter, we don't want to lock ourselves into timelines exactly, and neither do the devs because things are going to change up in the air. Things are going to happen as soon as they're as soon as they're ready. They're going to happen, and they may need to be delayed if they're not ready. So we don't want to promise something and have it not be true. We all know what happens when that happens. So we would rather just keep it to it's coming soon. It's right at the forefront. It's not right at the forefront, and give you guys an honest answer on that. Than say, hey, yeah, it's coming out at this time, this date. So hopefully that's enough information as to say what's priority and what's not. Priority is guilds and multiplayer, and those are the two main features. And of course, fixing all the bugs and balancing. So the UI and the problems with it, as far as the PC UI, they are working on that. This comes from original IP, and a lot of players as well have mentioned the UI. So they are working on moving around the aspects of the AI of the UI and also the scale of the UI. That is something that is a pressing issue to the devs. So that is something that is definitely being worked on hard on the PC side of things. So again, as far as timeline, I don't have one, but it is one of the more pressing issues. And as far as MTXs outside the gotcha system, it's been brought up to devs. It's not off the table. It's not planned. So that's the best I can give you for that right now. as far as just like a one-time, this is what you're buying, this is what you get, this is the price on it. So we don't know whether that's going to happen for sure or not, but it is not off the table. It is not. It is not a no, and they're very honest about their answers of no. When it's a no, they'll tell me it's a no. And then the loot filter and the we already went over that. As far as collecting items per season, we're working with the devs on that. I've passed along your concerns, and I know it's a big concern of everybody's, so I have passed that along. Don't have any more information on that though. As far as the invisible mobs go, that's something that's been passed on as well as far as the bugs go. So that's there as well. And as far as Thea being free, I've been asked that several times. We don't know if she's going to be free or not, but she is coming back in some form or fashion. But we don't know whether it's going to be free or if it's next season or the season after or whatnot. So we don't really have a lot of details on it. So the rest of the things, localization they're working on, we've given them details about that. If you are a content creator on the content server, or you know someone that is that's trying to get the content creator tag on this Discord, just let me know, and we'll make sure that we get that for them. Apparently there was some confusion over getting that content creator onto this Discord, so that can be done. The settings are fixed. The memory leaks should be a lot better now, but it is an issue that's being worked on still. The carrier and as far as not being able to use cellular data as versus Wi-Fi is also a high priority being worked on as well. Yeah, so that's pretty much most of the things that we're passing on to the devs, and we'll be moving on from there to we'll go through the open questions here at the end, but Extra is going to go over some dot/ailment/persistent damage confusions and what we can find out about that. So I'll pass it on over to Extra.
Alrighty then. Hello, everyone. So, dots and ailments and all that, that is, at face value, it is a mess. If you have no idea what you're looking at, you will have no idea what you're looking at. It is difficult to understand that. So, I'll start with ailments first. Each elemental or each base type of damage, physical, erosion, and the elemental damage types, every single type of damage you can do can apply an ailment. However, specifically bleed, ignite, and wilt are special in that you need in addition to needing the ability to apply the ailment, you will also need base damage for the ailment. The base damage for these three ailments, bleed, ignite, and wilt, is 0. And when it is 0, it cannot and will not apply. So base damage for ailments, you've probably seen the modifiers for it. It can show up on amulets, it can show up on weapons, sometimes it's on your talent tree. Oh, is my volume low? Crap. 1 second. Just 1 second. That might be my problem. Okay, syntax says we can hear it. Oh, okay, never mind. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, if your base ailment damage is if your ailment damage is 0, you cannot apply the ailment. That even applies if you have a modifier that says always apply X ailment, like dirty tricks from the warlock tree. And there's a couple items that do that too. So how do you get them? How do you get base ailment damage? Well, amulets specifically, they have every type of base ailment damage. You can get, a modifier for plus 60 bleed, plus 60 ignite, plus 30 wilt. So if you want the ability to apply an ailment, make sure somewhere in your build you have, at least for those three elements, you have the ability to apply them and you have base ailment damage applied. Cool. Okay, and shock, that's special. You don't need base damage, and it is innately based on your hit damage. I believe the base value is 3%. And what it does is that when an enemy is shocked, the next time you hit them with anything, they will take they'll take the shock damage divided by 12 for it as additional secondary damage every time you hit them. And then after 12 hits, it will expire. If you have a source of like you shock an additional time, that divides the number of hits you do, or you do until it runs out. So instead of being divided by 12, if you have one additional shock for hit, it will be divided by 6. So 3% divided by 6 is if you have one additional shock at base. There is like it's an interesting mechanic, that one.
That one's a
Frostbite.
complicated one. Does anybody have any questions on that one? Because that one took me a long time to understand.
Any questions on shock, or really ailments in general?
Okay. Sounds like you got them all covered, man, for that part.
Yeah, so Yoon, with specifically bleed, ignite, and wilt, if your base ailment damage is 0, you cannot apply the ailment ever. And yet, Articus, you cannot apply. Oh, okay, so that's lightning damage. So when it comes to lightning damage, you don't need base damage. You just need lightning damage. So if your lightning damage is 0, it will not apply shock. If you deal 1 lightning damage, you can apply shock. That's the minimum. Yeah, Krister. So basically, when you shock an enemy, the next 12 instances of hit damage they take, unless you have a source of additional shocks for hit, that they will take a secondary shock damage, and you can buff the actual shock damage wise, sources of base shock. Okay, Trump had us. Yeah, so both skills. Yeah, both skills will be dealing wilt, but both skills will be dealing different wilt damage. Different amounts of wilt damage depending on the skill. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I'll move on to affliction now. That's a pretty good one. So my understanding is that base affliction is 0. So you need any source of plus X affliction per second. There's a lot of modifiers that do that. There's a bunch on a talent tree. If you want to get it easy, Psychic has tons of it. So yeah, affliction is a debuff an enemy has. You can't see the debuff. I'd like to be able to see it. It caps at 100, and each stack of affliction increases the amount of damage over time that the enemy takes. And my understanding is that it does not expire once applied. It is permanent. Okay, Mike. You put down 2 axes. A chance to bleed doesn't change. Okay, so Mike, if you have 2 axes with chance to bleed, you have a high bleed chance. But if you do not have an instance of base bleed damage, you cannot apply it. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Each of the imbues gives you base damage. So if you want an easy way to get base damage for shock, shock 2, I guess, for wilt, ignite, and bleed, then you can put on an imbue and you'll be able to apply it. It's real simple, real easy, that one. Yeah.
And can you go over extra the differences between the fact that not all dots are this and not all afflictions are that, and not all
Okay. So
ailments are this and that?
Okay, so there's 2 types of main types of persistent damage. You got the ailment damage of specifically bleed, ignite, and wilt. Not shock. Shock is not considered persistent damage. Neither is frostbite, but frostbite doesn't damage itself, so the other type of persistent damage is skill persistent damage, and you can tell this real easily. The skill will straight up say deals X persistent damage per second. So Flame Path, it does X fire persistent damage per second. Shadow Swamp, X erosion persistent damage per second. Yeah. So Mike, that if you don't have base bleed damage, then yeah, you can't apply it. That's just how that works.
And
Okay,
just to clarify on that, if just because it has a persistent tag doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to deal persistent damage. You may need that base damage. It may only be part of its damage. It may only be
I was going to get to that. I was going to get to that. So, if you were to take a modifier that was specifically said, plus 12% persistent damage. It would buff exactly two different things. It would, well, yeah, it buff the two types. It would buff bleed, ignite, and wilt, and it would buff skill persistent damage. It wouldn't, for example, Thundercloud, that is a persistent skill because it has a timer, but it does not do persistent damage. So a persistent damage up will not increase the amount of damage Thundercloud does. Okay, and yeah, any questions on that? Oh, I should probably go over reaping, right? Don't trust the tooltip, Mike. That's probably the axes are probably working. It's just a tool. Yeah, tooltip's terrible. So yeah, I'm going to go over reaping now. So reaping is a very interesting mechanic. It is primarily tied to the God of Darkness trees, but gear can have it. There's reaping agony support that can have it. So I'm going to go over basic reap first. Reap, it has two stats on it you need to pay attention to. You have reap duration and reap cooldown. Reap, fundamentally, it will take the reap duration. While the enemy is taking either type of persistent damage, so ignite, bleed, wilt, or skill persistent damage like flame path. While the enemy is taking that damage, if you were to reap them for 1 second, and some skills say that, or some sources of reap say that, they would instantly take chunk damage, secondary chunk damage, equivalent to the amount of damage they would have taken from that damage over time over exactly 1 second. And all sources of reap have a cooldown. They can't, constantly do that, at least not on their own. And yeah, the reap cooldown it just tells you how long before you can reap again. And also all sources of reap. Okay, yeah, Silex. So reap does not reduce the duration at all. I'm going to get into the alternative reap in a second. That's a can of worms in itself. Yeah, it does not remove the timer at all. If you reap 1 second, you don't remove 1 second. It just, yeah. Base. Okay, so reap cooldown. You can only increase or decrease reap cooldown with reap cooldown percent. Basic cooldown will not affect reap cooldown. It will not, period. There's another mechanic with reap. If you were really, if you were thinking, oh wow, I can just like stack reap cooldown and have like a reap apply every 0.1 seconds and will obliterate everything. Not how that works. There is actually a ceiling on how fast a reap can cool down, and that ceiling is equivalent to the reap duration. So if you were to hypothetically have a reap, a source of reap that is a 1 second duration and a 1 second cooldown, increasing reap cooldown will do nothing. There's a plenty viable reap build. It's a lot. It's extremely powerful if you know how to use it. Yeah. So the ceiling is equivalent to the duration. So if your reap is 1 second, the cooldown is 1 second. You don't need to add any cooldown. It's not going to go any faster. And that also means when you have several different reap sources, they're not going to chunk all at once. They will not apply all at once. If you have 3 different reaps, they will not do it at once. It will take one of them, and then you have to wait for the internal cooldown. So if it's a 0.5 second, you have to wait 0.5 seconds, and then the next reap happens, and then then the next reap happens after the duration of the second reap. Any questions on that before I move on into the hellscape that is reap purification? Oh yeah, all sources of reap will share the same, not the same cooldown, but you can boost the cooldown of all of reap sources with just reap cooldown percent. That will work on every single one of them.
But they don't all share their cooldowns. They all have their individual cooldowns. If you have 4 different reaps, they all have their own individual reap cooldown.
Correct, Rob. Okay, so the only source of reap cooldown in the talent tree I'm aware of is in the psychic tree. The psychic tree deals with reap a lot. It's like it's the reap tree. That's in God of Darkness, by the way. Okay, so syntax. If you have 3 different sources of reap, the first one will apply. and it will have the duration. The second one will not apply until the duration of the first one is over, even though it does chunk damage. So, okay, hypothetical, you have 3 different reaps. Each one has a duration of 1 second and a reap cooldown of 1.5 seconds, and you didn't modify this at all. The first reap will happen, you'll chunk them for 1 second, and then it goes on cooldown for 1.5 seconds. 1 second later, because that is the duration of the reap, the next reap will occur, deal 1 second of damage, and then go on its 1.5 second cooldown. Then the third reap will occur after 1 second, because the duration was 1 second. Do 1 second of damage, then go on its 1.5 second cooldown. And by the time that's done, the 1.5 second actual reap cooldown will have expired, and you can reap again from the first one. Basically, it's more of like a time management thing. If you're going to make a reap build, you need to do some math and figure out how to properly manage your time so you're not wasting reap cooldown. You're not wasting anything. You don't want to be wasteful of reap. It's a math thing. If anyone has questions, still has questions after this. Okay, okay, yeah. So every single source of reap will say it will reap for X seconds, and it will have a X second cooldown. Reaping Agony has like a 1.5 second cooldown. There's a couple items, unique items that have it, like Torturer's Gloves has a 0.5 second cooldown, but it has a proc condition. You can also scale. The only way to scale reap cooldown percent past linear amounts is with I forgot what they're called, but they're legendary dexterity boots, and that lets you scale them with agility blessings. Okay, any other questions on what I had said before I move on to reap purification? Because I got a lot of questions on that. I think I just did syntax. I mean, it with what I just said, that's how it works. Like it's simple. It just doesn't look simple at face value. I have a written form. Hey guys, if you go into the Gemma channel and in the pinned messages, there's an old build. I don't recommend the build, but it does explain how Reap works in actual written form. Any other questions? I'm going to move into Reap purification in 30 seconds. Okay, yeah, that's what I was trying to go at with the Reap ceiling Ezekiel. Reap cooldown ceiling, but Reap does all of its damage at once. It doesn't do it over time. But in order for another Reap to happen, you need to wait for the listed duration to expire, even though it does all of its damage at once. So the Reap duration stat kind of doubles as a ceiling cooldown and also the amount of damage you do.
Okay, so we've gone over that a couple of times. You know, if you have any further questions, you can always get with Extra after.
Yeah, I'm going to move with I'm going to go to Reap purification now. So repurification, that is a talent in God of Darkness, or in Psychic Tree, which is a subtree of God of Darkness. It is a very unique talent. It is completely reworks how Reap works, and a lot of builds use it, and it's very fun and it's interesting. So take everything you had listened to about me talking about Reap earlier, throw all of it out. That's not what it does anymore. With repurification, what it will do is that instead of doing all your chunk damage at once, and then the dot continues to go on, it will override the reap duration stat, and it will instead do 80% of the duration of the damage of time effect as instant chunk damage. And there's 2 parts to this. It has a penalty to ailments, but it sorta has a buggy penalty to damage over time skills. Not well understood. So, for ailments, if you were to do reap purification, 80% of the damage that dot would have done over its entire lifetime is done instantly, and then the ailment is completely removed. It is gone. You will need to reapply it. That's how that works with ailments. And then the reap duration stat is still important for the internal cooldown, though. And also reap cooldown is obviously still important for that.
Also, I can actually tell you the way it works with skills. It's just removing the dot from the target. So if the skill is still applying a dot after it's been reaped, it will just continue to apply the dot.
Okay, so I have testing. That's why I said it's buggy, and I'm not really gonna. So Zeta, as I said to you earlier, with Flame Path, it removes 80% of the duration for some reason, but it doesn't do
It,
that to Shadow Swamp. I don't know, man.
it was removing percent of the duration. It was just not removing the skill itself.
No, it was
Like,
straight up deleting the entity. It was straight up deleting the entity.
oh,
But it doesn't do that for Shadow Swamp. It's weird as
gotcha.
hell with skill duration. Don't worry about it, though. It's probably not going to be important to your build. So that's just a really weird um, asterisk to apply at the end of that. Any questions on reap purification? So it's kind of simple, but it is a fundamental rework to how it works.
So that's it. So
Reap
for
purification
my
is
using,
extremely viable, and I think most of the viable reap builds use reap purification.
so from my understanding, all persistent damage is considered a dot, and all dots are dots. Persistent damage can come from ailments or skill ailments, and ailments can either be a dot of persistent damage or not, because shock and frostbite are not, and the others are. So that kind of recaps it. Is that right?
Yeah,
So it is a confusing subject. I can understand why there's a lot of confusion about it for everybody. I mean, it is a little back and forth, but if you're doing damage over time, it's a dot. If you're doing, persistent damage, it has to be labeled as persistent damage. And some ailments are dots and some ailments are not. And then you also went over how you actually get the ailments on the targets, which with frostbite and shock don't necessarily need a base damage, but with the other ones do need a base damage. So I think that should pretty well cover it. Does anybody have any other major questions that haven't been gone over yet? Okay, so gonna move on to, I guess, the questions that Staring's been moving towards. So Staring has been kind of gathering up the questions you guys have been asking to make sure they don't get lost along the way. So thank you to Staring for that. Appreciate you, boss. And we're gonna, let me zip up here and go to them. I know ghost nerfs are frustrating, and it does push you into investing and fixating on other mechanics to use, and it can be frustrating when it's your main mechanic that gets a nerf to it. But again, if I thought it was feasible to ask devs to wait 3 months just to try out some balance changes and then wait another 3 months to try out some balance changes, I would ask them to do that. But I can't in good conscience ask them to wait 3 months between trying out every balance change set they want to try out. I just can't do it. I can't. I know it's frustrating. It's frustrating to me too, but it's just the nature of playing a game in beta. I just don't see any way around it other than that's just going to have to be dealt with for the first season. Hopefully most of them will get ironed out, especially the big ones in the first season. And I will push to them that, especially at 1.0 and on, that really shouldn't be done. And that's a major, major community concern. So I will definitely bring that up and make sure that they're aware that this is a very important thing to the market that they're marketing to. So I will make sure of that. And there is not an ETA on getting us a minion stat page, but it has been pushed as a very, I don't even know if it's going to happen for sure or not, but it is something that we're pushing as a high priority to devs, as something that people want. And to go along with that, we're also pushing very hard the real-time stats on info, so that if you buff your character up a whole bunch, that you can actually see the buffs affecting it in real time on that info page. So that's another thing that we're pushing very hard. I can't make any promises about them coming, but we are pushing for them hard, guys. The increasing 100% physical to cold and then 10 increased cold damage. Do you do 10% increased damage? You do 10% extra cold damage. So if that's an extra, additional, or more, as we went over, it's going to apply differently than it's just increased, or if it's flat damage, right? But it is going to affect that as cold damage. So if I convert a fire spell to cold damage and I have adds percent cold damage on my gear, yes, it will be affecting the final damage in some form or fashion, depending on whether it's increased or the extra, more additional. But yeah, it does. If you increase the physical damage, though, that will still increase the physical damage that was converted to the cold. Yes. So if you have a percent that increases cold damage and a percent that increases physical, those are both going to help you, from my understanding. Anybody else want to chime in on that, just in case I'm wrong? Nope. Okay.
You're right.
That's how I've always built my builds, and they've always worked out that way. I've always gotten extra damage. And another thing, guys, that I always go over with people is test on the dummy. I know he's a dummy, but he's actually very, very helpful. Don't go off your tooltip damage off your main page. Don't go off of your tooltip damage on your skills page. Don't go off that number that it says, because you can have a very low number there, but be hitting a whole bunch of times a second. Or you can have a very, very high number there, but only hit once every 5 seconds, and that can affect everything greatly. So what you want to do when you're testing things is hit the dummy for a good while. Look at the top number, which is your total average. Look at the spike damage, which is your highest over 5 seconds, and then try out switching added fire damage to fire piercing and test it again and see what happens. That's the best way that I've learned to test out these things, and I learned it from these guys Zeta and Extra that make all these crazy builds. That's what they do. They just sit there and swap out things and test and figure it out. So that's the best thing you can do to find out if something's actually increasing your damage, is just use it on the dummy. Additional critical strike rating from raid support. 7%. Your attack crit chance will not be 8.15.
I can
Because
actually. Oh, go ahead.
go for it.
So
No,
I
go
was
for it.
actually going to bring this up. So raid support does not provide you flat crit. It is a multiplier to your crit. So, for example, a level 20 raid support will provide you 1.95% additional agility or additional crit strike rating for supported skills per stack of agility blessing. Assuming you have 4 to start with, that would be just under 8%. So you would just multiply your crit chance by 8%. And that's all it would
And
do.
by that you mean multiply. I've got a 3,000 crit percent out of all these percentages that I've added up, which equates down to a very, very small actual crit chance. But it would take that and add on that additional 8% to that number.
Yes, it's 8% of your final crit chance value that you already had. So going from 3,000, it would be 3,200, or no, it'd be 3,024.
Well, no, going from 3,000, wouldn't it be higher, more like
Or no,
3,400?
sorry, I'm doing my math wrong.
Yeah, it'd be like 3,400, just more roughly. I'm just ballparking it here, but it'd be about
It'd be
3,400.
It'd be 3,240. It's 8 times.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. My math is
yeah,
wrong now.
yeah. I did my
All
math
this
wrong
stuff is
to start
complicated.
with, but yeah.
I did
Uh,
my math wrong. All this stuff is very complicated. It is something that everybody's going to get more familiar with as we go on. I've been playing this game for a long time, and I still don't know how everything works in it. And it's a lot of it's testing. If you test things out, you'll find out what works. That's why I recommend the test dummy for dummies like me.
yeah. So syntax, that is correct. It'd be 3,000 times 1.08. Uh, it is something that is, for example, uh, if you had 8 agility blessings and you had it as a level 21 drop from the thing, it would be 16% additional, and it's just nice at that point.
As far as adding more reflect items, that's something that I'm sure that they're considering. They're considering adding all kinds of things to the game. And when new seasons come out, it's not just going to be, oh, here's a hero trait, have fun. They're hoping to have a hero to hero trait every season, no matter what. That's the plan. And new. And of course, some skills and some items for sure. Definitely items, hopefully skills. So they are planning on doing that, Sur of Seer. So I can only see more items coming. I don't know if they'll be reflect items specifically. When it comes to reflect X elemental damage, does that scale in any way? As far as I know, there's not anything that scales reflecting damage, but that would be elemental damage that you can scale as elemental damage, I believe. Is that correct, guys, or would it just reflect that flat amount?
I don't think anyone's done enough testing with Reflect to know anything about it. It's a very underutilized mechanic. My
So,
recommendation, man, is to just get the items and test it yourself on maps and to see what feels better. Because obviously you can't test it on the dummy
Yeah, the test dummy doesn't hit you fast enough.
or at
so
all.
uh, I'm going to say this, and this was something that they said in the changes between CBT2 and open beta, was they made it so secondary damages um, were able to scale with things like elemental damage whenever they were speaking about explosion mods, for example. But I do not know if they've made it so that way reflect counts for that, because it is a type of secondary damage.
A lot of this we're testing ourselves, guys. It's a lot of this is up in the air and we're testing ourselves. Part of that is the news article that I put out, and the kudos goes out to all the people making the tools that are available with this. And hopefully those tools are just going to get more and more robust, and we'll be able to have more and more details in the tools for dummies like me. So that's most of the big questions that we saw inside the chat that Staring kind of picked up and gathered up that were good and very thorough, needed a thorough answer. And let me just make sure I haven't missed any. That's most of the ones that have been gathered up and put into chat here. Nerfing strong builds arbitrarily mid-season. I don't think they're trying to necessarily nerf a specific build, as more it is a mechanic. For example, Yuga's change from CBT to OBT where it changed from not being able to be reaped. That was just something that made him do insanity damage on anything you could reap, period, super easily. And it was more about it wasn't about nerfing the build that everybody was trying to go for with the plague shot and that. Now, if there happens to be a popular build out there that gets nerfed by it, that's going to happen. But it was more about the mechanic of if Dot Yoga is able to reap and have that applied to his trait, he's just going to do insanity, insanity, insanity damage with every dot all along the way. So it's more mechanics that they're looking at, I think, than it is about, oh, this build is too popular. I know when it's your build, it's going to feel personal, but I don't think it's meant to be nerfs on builds. It just ends up being nerfs on some popular builds when a mechanic gets nerfed.
So I want to speak on that because there was the whirlwind change in today's patch, I believe, is when that change happened. Can someone correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah, I think that was today.
So
Done today, the scaling on it was nerfed by 30 or 33%, I believe.
Yes.
We don't know exactly what that 33% means though, because so many people have so many buffs,
well,
and I
it's
think
base
that's
damage.
important that they. I
No,
think
it's
that's
scaling
it's just
damage.
base damage.
In
Yeah.
the skill. The skill and how it scales was nerfed by 30%.
Yeah.
Okay.
So everything that scaled off of it just received a generic nerf across the board.
But what I was trying to get to is that I think that's important why we're keeping pushing for more detailed notes about all of these changes when they come out, because it's frustrating to, not only is it frustrating to have your build nerfed and you don't know why, it just adds another level to it. What exactly changed? What exactly caused this to happen? What mechanic are they trying to deal with?
Yeah.
You know, and so I will continue to push for more detailed notes and more detailed patch notes and more detailed details about exactly all the changes that go on, but I can't promise them going away.
Well,
Yeah.
I think what they're trying to get at isn't like they don't so much care about the whirlwind change as they do that they're making gameplay changes to people's builds, which could break some people's builds in the middle of the season, thus leaving them that they either need to completely respec and overhaul their build when,
If we
they
can
might
find
not.
a way to do balance changes mid-season without doing that to people's builds, I'd be all ears and ready to take it absolutely to the devs. I just don't see a way of doing balance changes that's not going to rebalance builds. And I don't see a brand new game being able to rebalance every 3 months.
I agree
I
with
just
that
don't
statement.
Specifically for the beta, guys. We're in a beta. That is the rationale. Once we get to 1.0, that's going to be a little bit less acceptable, and we're going to be pushing that even harder than we already are.
Yeah,
The other thing
exactly.
is, honestly, it would be nice if they said that they were going to do changes and just announced that, hey, this will be a balance patch instead of just letting it go through. So that way we know when balance patches are coming through. So if something does change, people are stocked up on resources and stuff like that, so they can acknowledge, like, hey, I'm able to change my build if a change does come through, instead of being blindsided by it. I think that's more the issue a lot of people would have, is if they can communicate, hey, yeah, Ian made a note. Basically, if you can provide an advanced patch note notice before actual patches in the future, that would do significant, like, it would do a lot of reducing the player damage with those changes.
Cause less damage throughout the community than it does when it just happens out of nowhere. And
Yeah, we'll push for that.
Yeah, I think that that's something that we can push for, is just, even if it's just a couple of days pre-notice will let players at least know that, hey, something's coming to your build, and you're going to want to use your build to get you some resources so you don't have to be blindsided by it.
Yeah. And
I can easily push for that. That's not a problem at all, guys.
Yep.
And specifically with when the game does come out of beta, and it's not going to be it's not going to be like a Warframe situation where it's always in beta. I can tell you all that. When it does come out of beta, our team will try to pass it along, and we are going to push for keeping, especially like gameplay balance changes, unless something's like egregiously broken. It's like breaking actual mechanics in the game, to keep those seasonal so players are able to actually play their builds and not just have to swap on the fly or with a few days notice mid-season after they already did all the work that they had done to clear the content that they were clearing. So, and also that was
So yeah,
asking like
that actually happened today already. It was a 30% about nerf. Okay, if it was a day or two ago, that may have been, and it's just now gaining the light that it deserves. But
Yeah, Mike, that actually hit live today.
because we got a lot of feedback today from a lot of people about it.
Is Mike the first
So,
level 100 Rahan?
Yes, he's
yeah,
the first
congratulations,
level
Mike.
100 NA servers that was officially recognized.
I think
Also,
he
yeah.
might know if it got nerfed 3 days ago or not.
Well, I think Mike is taking a break today because he's been grinding so hard for level 100. From what I've talked to him, he hasn't. My damage hasn't changed today. Well, I logged on and tested it. Well, Mike, it might be because the way your build is scaling is you have like 20 buffs active at one time and you're not scaling whirlwind as high as it can be. So like the top end, you might notice it comparatively to other builds than just your build.
You're probably killing map bosses the same amount of time, but Keegan may take a couple more seconds for you, and you're not going to notice that.
That being said, I have heard conflicting reports on whether or not Whirlwind got or
Yeah,
nerfed.
let's stop conjecturing because we don't even know 100% exactly what happened, and that's the whole point behind this. Is we need more notes. That's the takeaway from this, guys. Is we're going to push for better notes, and we're going to push for more detailed notes and more information about these kind of things, so that there's more transparency. Because that's what we want to. That's what we want to be able to do, is say, hey, this changed, this didn't, this changed, this didn't, this is going to change, this didn't. But that's something that we're just going to have to play it by ear how it goes. Does anybody have any other major questions for us today?
I mean, do you guys want to try and move it to open mic?
Yeah, we'll just go ahead and
Once
does
we do that, guys, I'm gonna head off and do stuff.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Are we calling it there then?
Will these Q&A sessions be a regular thing? Yes, sir. The form that you used that's in the news article, you can submit your questions there, and we're going to sort them by date. And we're going to sort them by date. And any new questions and new trends that we're seeing, we're going to address those. Any new information that we've got from devs, we're going to address those. And we're going to try and have a subject of clearing up confusion, like we did with dots and affliction today. So we're going to try and do that in every session if we can. Right now, we've got them scheduled for every Wednesday and every Friday at the same time. So that's 7 Central, UTC -6. Someone pointed out to me I had put -5 in the post. My bad. It is -6, UTC -6, 7 p.m. Central, Wednesdays and Fridays, U.S. time. And we're going to try and have them that often. If they end up being too often, we'll break it down to 1 day a week.
And also, we may make scheduling changes to Crow's Corner based on maintenance times. If it works within our schedules and it works within like a day that's optimal for like the planning we have, we may move Crow's Corner around in the week just to better fit when players aren't able to play the game, so we can give players something to do and something to engage with about the game.
Okay. Anything else before I cut the recording?
No, thank you guys all for coming. We appreciate you coming, and we appreciate your feedback. Without getting the feedback to the devs, without all you guys giving us the feedback, we can't gather it up and put it together into nice, neat little formats to give to them. And then they don't have nice, neat little formats that they can look at to see what they need to change. So thank you guys for coming, and thank you guys for participating. We look forward to seeing you on Friday.